hello. My name is Della.
Hi, I'm Felicia.
And I'm Colleen.
Welcome to another episode of the Butterfly Effect. Happy October, everybody. It's so nice to be back here with you, ladies. Thank you so much for being on this journey together. It's fantastic.
I love it. I look forward to it every month.
Me too.
So do I. So do I. I want to thank our viewers for joining us today, tonight, this evening. Thanks for coming along with us on this journey as we talk about triggers. Do you know your triggers? Do some people, some situations, some sounds, some smells maybe push your buttons sometimes? This month, that is the topic of the butterfly effect. We are talking about triggers. Let's find out more about our triggers. Let's find out what triggers are, first of all, and how they affect us. What are some signs that we are being triggered? And so we're going to talk about everything related to triggers today. We're going to share some experience with you. We look forward to hearing from you as you share your experience with triggers. What do they mean to you? What kind of triggers do you have? Let's learn from each other. Tonight's presentation is going to be done by Colleen. She's done a lot of research on this, and we are so looking forward to hearing what she's got to say.
Oh, the pressure.
And I do want to mention something before we go on. If you are sending us comments on Facebook, please do that little disclaimer that Facebook has put on the post. Allow StreamYard to display your name, and that way we can see who you are as we mention your comments. Okay, so before we go ahead with this, Felicia, do you have anything to add? And then we'll start the show.
Not at all. I'm looking forward to see what Colleen has prepared. Yes, go on.
Can I just say that we came on tonight for our viewers? Okay, this is really fun because sometimes we just show up and we're all dressed in the same color or whatever. Tonight we dress up and we show up without really preparing, really honestly, and we're all wearing some kind of lace. So I think we're synced.
We're on the same wavelength.
The messages, the subconscious.
That's it. Either that or we've been working together for so long that we just kind of know each other.
Intuitively know, yeah.
We are in sync.
What's the dress code for today?
Okay, so here we go. Let's start this topic of triggers. Colleen.
Yes. Okay. So as always, we'll start with a kind of a definition. Definition for triggers was a little bit different because it's obviously a trigger is something that, starts something or that kind of sort of thing. So I kind of found, so triggers are anything that might cause a person to recall a traumatic experience they've had. And then I also found triggers can bring you right back to the emotional state that you had at the original event, right? So if you think about some of the triggers that we might have, and you mentioned them in the intro there a little bit, it can be people, it can be places, it can be smells, it can be words, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a word, guys, just think in your mind, is there a word that when somebody says it, it like gets your back up right away? Right? Like for some people, it's the B word. Like Felicia had a little chuckle there.
What's the B word?
You can't say it. It's a swear
word. You can say anything you want.
I'll say the slang version of it, right? If somebody calls you a biatch.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I know exactly what you mean. I'm just pulling it. So but like, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or sounds, right? Like if some people, if they hear a backfire of a car and they, it sounds like a gunshot or something, they might have, an immediate reaction to something, right? Mm-hmm. Different colors may trigger something in some people.
Yes.
I personally don't experience that one, but there's a lot of people, certain colors bring them right back to a time or a place or a situation that really stresses them out.
Yeah.
So I gave you guys some homework this week, and I asked you to think about some of the triggers that you have.
Yeah.
And so before you share those, so what do triggers mean to you? Della, what do triggers mean to you when somebody says trigger?
So honestly, trigger is very negative to me. So you say trigger, and all of a sudden I go into something that's going to make me feel angry or sad or frustrated or self-conscious. So a trigger to me has a negative effect. That's how I feel about triggers.
Yeah. And that's, most of us are like that, right? When we think about triggers, we think about a negative response that is uncontrollable, right? It's almost reflex.
Yes.
How about you, Felicia?
For me, when I say a trigger, it's almost like a reminder of a past trauma. That's what comes to mind. That's what comes to mind. And that can cause one to feel an overwhelming sadness or an anxiety or even panic. So easier put, I think, a trigger can refer to a mental or emotional stimulation of some sort that either makes you happy or makes you feel happy or makes you feel sad. So I hear you, Della, that you say for you it has a negative connotation. I think it could be both. In mental health, for example, it's something that affects your emotional state, causing an overwhelmed feeling of some type of distress, which is exactly what you're saying, Della. That will lead to feeling strong emotions like, anger, fear, anxiety, sadness. So, like you said, Colleen, as well, they can be identified through our five senses. So, in other words, anything we feel, anything we hear, anything we smell or taste or even touch, any of these sensations associated with the five senses can lead to an emotional or even behavioral response. And that's what trigger is for me.
Absolutely.
Can I read some of the comments?
Absolutely. Sure. Please.
Okay, so we have Stephen Albright, and he says, my triggers come from so many different directions. He does say we're all gorgeous, so thank you. I had to read that. Stephen says also, music is my biggest trigger. I think myself into sad songs. So I'm going to read these, Colleen, and then you can address them. A Facebook user says, someone who knows your triggers is the same as someone who knows how to push your buttons, right? Oh, yes, people can use that against you. Stephen also says,
can they though? Can they?
Yeah, well, you're gonna teach us that, right? And Stephen says, a trigger word for me is plateau. It's a dirtiest word in stroke recovery. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, okay, we're going to talk about that.
Those are unique to your experience for sure.
Very much. And I wonder what that means to you, Stephen. Facebook user also says, if one pulls the trigger, the gunpowder explodes and pushes the bullet out of the barrel of a gun. I don't know how to relate that.
I'm only laughing here because this past weekend I've taken and I got licensed for gun shooting for both restricted and non-restricted guns. So it's so funny that someone brought that up, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, now I know what he means.
And then also another comment here. In human behaviors, triggers are pushing the hot buttons that makes one go ballistic. I can relate to that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to hand it back to you, Colleen.
Sure. So for me, a trigger, something that triggers us in a negative way, to me just signifies that we haven't worked through something entirely, right? It's still there. So if you think about something that maybe triggered you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, that you have a lesser reaction, can you think of something You don't have to share it, or you can share it if you'd like. But is there anything that you remember that used to trigger you in a huge way, and then today it's a much more mild or non-existent reaction?
Are you asking us?
Yeah.
Are you asking us, or are you asking the audience?
I'm asking everybody, the audience and you guys. Is there anything?
Okay.
So that's a yes. Would you like to share something that you
I would.
your experience?
I would.
Okay, go ahead, Della.
I would. And actually, these comments are from our friend Ahmed Shah.
Oh,
Yes. So welcome on here, Ahmed. We are always looking forward to hearing from you and your comments and experiences. Okay, so something that I want to say has been a trigger for me all of my life, and perhaps in the past few months, I've been more aware of it, and I've even tried to see what's what. Is when people interrupt me while I'm speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so, although it's not as bad as before, whereas before it really used to bother me. Now it's not as bad. Okay, I'm sure
so
you
that
have
is something.
follow-up.
That's a trigger that you've developed some management of that particular trigger.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Felicia, before we move on with that, I saw that you nodded that you wanted to share a trigger that you've had some progress with.
Not necessarily. I have so many. Honestly, I worked so much on myself for the last, I think, 15 years that I'm so aware. Yeah, so I'm not gonna go into explaining, because then I will keep on talking and talking, and I will never, I'm gonna keep it, in that. I would love to hear from the audience, though, if anyone knows of a trigger that they have noticed that in the past used to be like an overwhelming and an uncontrollable way to react, and now because they maybe became aware or they've done some work on themselves. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, for sure.
So and that's I think that's really key. I think if I look back at years ago, I can find a lot of different triggers, and I think over time they have gotten less and less important, and nowadays I just don't consider them as triggers anymore. But this one in particular, I think it's just been with me for a long time. Stephen, let me see. Ahmed Shah says we deal with hot buttons in a unique way in verbal Aikido, and I do remember that. Actually, Stephen says, I'm actually very hard to offend and refuse to hold grudges. My trigger moments are just that moment. I love that. I don't say long. So that's really important to know about yourself.
So it sounds like Stephen has learned some strategies that those triggers or those things, because I think we all have triggers. We all have things that will bring us back to a moment. And over time, with practice, we can learn, and it sounds like Stephen's, got it figured out. We can learn ways to acknowledge it and move on. Like lickety split, just as fast as it came, just dismiss it and move on to the next thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So for people that still have triggers, because most of us still have things that right. So, somebody, like the 40th time somebody goes, Mom,
that counts as trigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Where you have anytime you have an irrational response to something, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you get overwhelmed with an emotion that you just in a moment. Yeah. So when somebody interrupts you, Della, mm-hmm. So what are you thinking? Like, what is your response? Let's start with that. What happens in your body, in your mind when that happens?
So in the past, mm-hmm. I'd like to say it would probably initially it would raise my heart rate.
Okay.
It would make me feel hot. It would probably get me mad. Okay. And if I was really close to that person, I would say it right there. Don't interrupt me. I would probably do that. And then if it was someone I didn't know too well, or if it was someone I wasn't as comfortable with, I would probably go into that whole self-talk of, what I have to say is not valuable enough. I was just disrespected. So yeah, these would be the things I would say to myself.
Mhm.
So interesting. A couple of things there. Consistently, your response is anger and disrespect, right? So you feel disrespected and you feel angry.
Yes.
What I found very interesting is that you do already have some control over your response, because it's almost like you choose, because I know the person versus I'm not familiar with the person. You already have the ability to not respond or to respond due to your anger. Did you realize that before?
No, not till this very moment. It's very true.
Yeah, so that's an interesting observation, is that you can and choose to control your reaction in some situations, and in others you just let it come out.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So does that demonstrate to you that you actually have the ability to control your response?
Of course I do.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's a reflex, right? So
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
now I know that for
yeah.
sure.
And so if you think back to what you just said, what was the difference between the people that you know well and that you're comfortable around versus the stranger that does the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
What's the
That's
difference
very
between your
interesting.
actions?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because with the people I'm really familiar with, and it's the people that are really close to me, I don't think that by me saying that I'm that's a very interesting question. I have no idea how to answer that question. It all comes to um, vulnerability. I think I'm more vulnerable with the people I love and I'm really close with. I don't want to show that side of myself to people.
Oh, okay. So it's about the impression that you're giving people of who you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was also noticing that you're putting more thought. You're stopping yourself and you're putting more thought when it's somebody that you're not familiar with. Because you're more aware of how you appear to them.
Yes.
And more
very
concerned.
True.
Is that fair to say?
Very, very true. Yeah, fair.
So if this were something that you were to look at more closely, so we talked about what your immediate response, your reactive, like almost like a reflexive response is. What would you like your response to be?
I actually would like to be able to continue talking as you know what I mean. I seriously, I think I really feel that way, that when someone's speaking, no one should interrupt that person. And so I really would like to be able to, with my tone of voice, show that person that I am not to be interrupted.
Oh, okay.
Without offending that person, without really having to get angry, without having to say anything that might upset them. I just want to continue what I'm talking about. So, yeah, but does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. So what I'm hearing from you is that it is important for you to acknowledge that and point it out before you can move on.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you hope to get from that acknowledgement, that statement that this just happened?
I think in some ways it's setting boundaries for me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. It's
yeah. And so I'm hoping that by showing that, then that won't happen again.
Okay. So somebody interrupts you and it makes you feel as though they're being disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that every time somebody interrupts you that their intention is to be disrespectful?
No, of course not.
Okay. So would it be equally as important for you to point out that they disrespected you if it wasn't their intention?
I think it's more like, okay, so here's the thing. I'd rather change that perspective in myself than having to say it.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go towards that.
This is getting deep, you guys.
I see a lot of comments coming up, and if you're noticing something that you'd like to share, feel free.
I'm really listening to you, Coach, so I can't really read the comments, but I can stop and read the comments if you like, because they're really important. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Okay. I have it on my phone in my peripheral vision, and I see it scrolling, so I don't know what's in there, but I know something's happening.
Okay, so let me read from Ahmed Shah. In my case, if someone would cut me off in the middle of a sentence, would push a trigger that could easily make me pull the trigger. You see, I'm not the only one. That's interesting. Also, thank you so much for saying that. Oh, I feel so much better. I would, he also says, I would usually dismiss a trigger. It depends on the offense and who it was coming from. Yes, again, same, right? Stephen says, figure it out might be an oversell. What is that? Oh, Stephen. Stephen says, this is personal. he says, figured out might be an oversell. I emailed Della my God/forgiveness moment. Haven't held a grudge since that day. Oh, Stephen, I hope you didn't hold a grudge. I needed to pick one person, and I picked a forgiveness coach for my show. But I so appreciated you sending me that. Thank you. Oh, that's so fun. I'm so glad you brought this up. So that gives me a chance to apologize for my oversight. I should have let you know. I'm so sorry. Okay, so next comment, it says, my worst trigger is someone eating, crunching food when I'm watching TV.
Is that my sister? Is my sister sending messages?
I don't know. That's another Facebook user, probably. Another trigger is when an employee is late and doesn't call.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so these are really interesting, right? Okay, so let's see. What else is here? Anger is too emotionally heavy to carry around. Put it down and keep moving. Leave the past in the past where it belongs. Thank you. That's great advice. My personal mantra that I have adopted is, I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to reach my destination.
Oh, read that one again. I like that one.
So it's, I cannot change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to reach my destination.
I like that.
Yes, me too. These are
great. I take that as one meaning, and the writer might have meant it in a different way. But how I took that is that if I adjust my perspective, is that I can choose a different response.
Yeah, I think you would be right.
I will actually say that if you work on yourself and you understand your triggers and what causes what, you will not respond, or actually your trigger, even though they push your buttons, your reaction will not be as dramatic. Will be like, it's almost like you won't even, it's almost like you keep on talking and let them interrupt. And when you're done, you say, yeah, you may speak now. Thanks for understanding and waiting for me to finish, or whatever. Like, you know.
Yeah. And the acknowledgement, I find that if the underlying reason why you have that trigger. So for example, most of the triggers that we've talked about are about somebody who's being inconsiderate or disrespectful. Generally, if you have a strong reaction, because it's normal to have a reaction. Like if somebody's being disrespectful, yes, you acknowledge it. Somebody's being, and you're right. You want to set boundaries. But if it stops you from continuing in the conversation, then perhaps to some degree, you are accepting that message.
I think it's a perspective here. Have
So-
you guys ever
Can I just finish what, because I just want to, and then I want to go back to you. The reason why I pause there, because I want my message with that is that if you have the confidence, so say for example, someone were to say to me, I'm trying to think of some kind of an insult. So let's just think of an example of an insult that somebody would say to you.
Would you like me to insult you?
Sure. I'm thinking of an example, but I'm not sure I should share it because then I'm outing a family member. Okay, so I'll just say it. So okay. I have a family member who consistently tells me that I'm an idiot. Right?
Okay.
And years ago, when this person would say, "Oh, you're such an idiot," or "You're like this," those words would come out of their mouth. And years ago, I used to hear that and go, oh, right? Like it hurt me, and it triggered me to feel insecure. That same person today, when they say, "You're such an idiot," makes me laugh. Mm-hmm. Their words are the same. Their message is the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm different.
Yes.
So, and that's why way back then, there was a part of me that believed that it might be true or it was true. But I've done a lot of work on myself. And now I know that not to be true. So because I know it not to be true, it has zero effect on me.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay. So here.
That was my message. So
let me say this and then we're done with my example. We can move on. So what you're saying is the next time someone interrupts me, instead of taking that interruption as a sign of disrespect, I should just change the way I look at that. Like Stephen says, change the way you look at things and things will change the way they look. It's true, right? And so if I don't give it that meaning, then it won't affect me like that anymore.
Right. So what if, because I apologize, I apologize ahead of time. I tend to be an interrupter. And so I have probably done this to you in the past. Della, I'm sorry. And from my perspective, when I find myself doing it, it's not that my intention is to be disrespectful. I'm so excited to share a message with you that it comes spilling out of me. And then I go, oh, I did it again. My intention is not to be disrespectful or to minimize you in any way. And I've noticed I do it less and I notice it more often. Like I'm more aware of it. Not that I notice it more often. I'm more aware of it. So I'm able to minimize it. But does that change the way that you receive it when you hear where it's coming from?
Definitely.
Oh.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. This has been very helpful. Not that I've been coached online. I hope other people have found some value. I want to go. Let's go to Felicia. I think she had something to say. Yeah. But then I want to go back to that crunching business, the crunching food business, and tackle that for a bit. Okay.
Hearing you guys talk, it brings my mind and my thoughts to my love for homeopathic medicine. And what I've learned, particularly in 25 plus years now, is that homeopathic medicine has such an amazing way of treating emotional triggers. And it's almost instant. It's incredible. So I was going to ask earlier, have you ever wondered why negative emotional characteristics exist in the first place? Sort of, yeah. Have you ever wondered?
Like what? Like getting angry, like in that case, getting angry.
Have you maybe considered that we inherit certain personality traits just like we inherit certain physical features through our genealogy?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
So when certain situations come up and we react negatively or positively, did you know that can actually lead to the development of the emotional pattern of behavior?
That makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Well, based on my clinical observation in my own practice, I have found that negative moods and thoughts, actions can bring many, many imbalances. Likewise, personality traits like impatience, fear, depression, or lack of self-confidence or lack of motivation can affect your vitality and impact your health adversely, negatively. So what I love most about the homeopathic approach is that the treatment does not change your personality trait. Rather, it helps you restore balance within that personality. So let me give you an example. Let's say if you tend to be judgmental or your thoughts go towards judging, homeopathic medicine will help you to become more tolerant with yourself and with others. Or let's say a person that has maybe a poor self-image. Through the treatment, will gain more self-confidence.
Interesting.
Yeah, so a great example is do you even know why some people tend to be arrogant? And we look or we think or we feel instantly something and maybe even be judgmental towards them.
Oh.
I find that behind that, there is low self-esteem issue. And most often than not, I mean, in not all cases, we can generalize it. We can just say it, but that's what I found, right? So that's how.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. A lot of triggers are the underlying reason is very often like insecurity or lack of confidence.
Yeah, so that's how some low confidence individual overcompensate for feeling unworthy, and that's why they become so arrogant. That's the only another one that I've noticed, particularly with children, hyperactive children who have the tendency to argue and most often seem to insist they're always right. They are very impatient, and they even have contempt, believe it or not, those little beings, right, for others. What I find with the homeopathic medicine, they soften up and they lose that edge. And the whole state of mind, the whole reaction, the whole being is different.
That's so cool. Maybe Felicia can do a presentation on homeopathy medicine one day, and right?
I will maybe next month. That can be our topic.
That would be great. That would be awesome. But so I see a couple of more comments here. Mm-hmm. Actually, this one is really cool. Stephen says, my worst pet peeves or trigger would be hearing someone chewing, especially gum, or people talking during a movie. We all have them. We all have those triggers, yeah. Right? And so go ahead, Colleen. Let's continue.
When we were first talking about this subject, and you and I think last week we were talking, and I laughed and I said, yes, when somebody puts the toilet paper roll on wrong. So if I'm in your house and you have it going under instead of over, I'm changing it. I'm just letting you know.
Me too. Me too. I do the same.
I don't change it. I don't notice it, so that must not be a trigger for me.
I have no idea where it came from, but it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt anybody, so I make no attempt to change it.
That's interesting. That's very
I do that too. I never thought of it, but I do it too.
Yeah. So triggers don't have to be drastic things. They can be, silly things as well.
yeah.
So some of the examples of triggers, we've already talked about most of them. So emotional triggers, so things like behaviors or feelings of, insecurity or being manipulated or being, those types of things. Material triggers, so things like keeping up with the Joneses, right? When the neighbor gets a new car, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of material triggers. Time or energy triggers, like I used to get hangry because I wouldn't, by the middle, it'd be 2:30 in the afternoon and I hadn't had a break at work. I hadn't eaten anything. And so, I would start being short-tempered because of, lack of food and lack of rest.
Yes.
Mental triggers.
Are you saying that your trigger is anger?
No, I'm saying the trigger was the lack of rest.
Come on, I'm just laughing here.
So, because my go-to generally isn't anger. That's not usually the one that I go to, but yeah. So, short-tempered maybe, but like impatient would be more likely me than anger. So mental triggers, like our inner thoughts, right? Most of our triggers are the way we see ourselves. That's why you were talking, Felicia, about confidence, right? If we don't have a level of confidence in the subject that we're talking about or in the situation, that insecurity can actually be your response. Physical triggers like close places, the dark, right? So there's those kinds of triggers as well. Somebody who gets in your bubble.
Yes, too close. Yes.
Or now with COVID, your 6-foot bubble.
Yeah, that's a trigger for a lot of people, even before this nonsense. But a lot of people don't like that. Can I just take a moment? There's this lovely, lovely lady who watches my shows all the way from Iran. And right now she's watching and she's sending us all sorts of beautiful comments. I just want to send her my love. Shahnaz June, thank you so much for being on here. Amazing. She says it's 5 a.m. in Tehran, and I love you so much, and that's why I'm here. Shahnaz June, manam doset daram. Oh, that's so nice, so nice. Okay, Stephen says I get annoyed much faster since my stroke in July of 19. Still doesn't last long, but much shorter fuse. I hear.
And you know what? That's impressive because often when you have a physical trauma, thank you. When you have a physical trauma like that, you don't have a lot of people don't have the ability to have to work through it because it's physical and you can't necessarily change what's happened. So the fact that you still are able to work through it and have coping skills to work through it is amazing. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. So I wanted to ask you, so these were some physical
responses.
Okay. Now I wanted to ask you this question. How do we let's say that person who's at the movie theater and someone's talking.
Yep.
How do we handle that? What do you think?
So that one's a little bit different in that, is it a trigger or are you requesting them to not interrupt your situation, right? Because there's two different situations there. It could be a trigger where you have an overreaction to the situation. Or it could just be, you know what, I can't hear the movie and I'd like to be able to hear the movie. Do you know what I mean? There's two separate situations that could be happening there. Okay. So wanting to be able to hear is not a trigger. So it's simply respectfully, calmly saying, that's more of a communication thing.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledging that, that you respect them, and I'd really like to be able to hear.
Mm-hmm. Or you could just say, shh.
Or you just give them the look, right? Now, if it's a trigger, that's a whole other bag of wax, right? Like that's a whole other thing.
Gotcha.
So I've got like a little bit of a five things to consider when it comes to triggers.
Perfect.
So number one, you want to stop and acknowledge. And when you gave the example of the stranger, you said this. You said, I stop and I think about it. And that's the first thing, is just noticing that it's a trigger, and it's not that it might be an overreaction. It might not be your true self reacting. It might be a trigger. So then you want to take a deep breath. So you want to recenter yourself. So you stop and you take your deep breath. If it is if you are triggered, for example, by a spouse or by somebody, and you don't want to say something that you regret, are you able to step away? So take a deep breath, remove yourself if you can from the situation, so that you stop the trigger from happening, and you don't say something that you would regret or do something that you would regret. Regroup. And then this is the point where you can look at it from a different perspective. Rewrite that story, right? So for example, when you were talking about somebody who interrupts you, how could you rewrite that story? What are some of the things that what other perspectives could you take on that?
She's just really excited. She wants to say something. Right?
She used me as her example.
No, I'm just going back, but it makes total sense, because it's true. Everybody loves me. Nobody really wants to hurt my feelings or disrespect me. People around me value what I have to say, but it is true that, they may just be excited and they want to say something. Someone said, "Oh, because you talk so slow, I thought you were finished."
Okay, that is disrespectful. That's there.
Okay. But no, I laughed at that one. I breathe a lot when I speak, but that besides the point. So, as you're talking, I have something that's like really important that I wanted to add, but I don't think you're finished yet. So go ahead.
Well, I have a couple of more, but you are welcome to interrupt me.
No, because that might just take us into a different tangent, and I don't want to do that. So finish what you have to say.
Okay. So number 4. So number 1 was stop. Number 2 was breathe. Number 3 is take a step back and look at it from a different perspective. If that doesn't get you to where you need to be, then I often have my clients do number 4, which is start recording or journaling, writing down, what happened right before I got triggered. You want to understand your reaction a little bit more. Okay. So what happened right before? So what was the trigger is basically what you're saying. So what happened right before? How did you feel in that moment? What was the trigger? Like, what was the reaction? What was the reflex? So how did you react? How did that work out for you? Right? Like, did it help you? Did it hinder the conversation or the situation? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, what could you have done differently? Right? So I asked you that. So for you, it was changing the perspective. So that might work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then you think of what else could I do differently? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing, and the reality is that some triggers, especially some of the big ones, it may be helpful to talk to somebody, whether that's a coach or a therapist. Seeking professional help is a positive way to work through triggers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what we have time for. I do want to hear what you had to say. And then, Felicia, I know that when we were talking about earlier, we were talking about homeopathic remedies for trauma. and for anxiety and depression. And if it would be okay, I'd like you to share that after Della talks about what she had. Would that be okay?
Let's see.
Okay.
She loves it. She loves sharing about homeopathy. She's very passionate about that. What I wanted to say, you actually mentioned that, there are those triggers that are way past this mundane stuff we're talking about, like, interrupting me while I'm talking or chewing gum while, you're sitting there. There are those really traumatic triggers, right? There are things that you do need help for. And so I'm thinking of things like, I grew up during the war, and the sound of fireworks always takes me back to when we had to go and hide in the basement because they were bombing our city, our town. So whenever I hear fireworks, I'd like to be able to enjoy it and really bask in that amazement that everybody else is. But it does, like, deep down inside, that's a trigger for me, because it takes me back to those moments of fear and uncertainty. But so these are the things that I think needs special help, like Colleen mentioned, talking to someone who's going to help you. There are lots of those triggers, I'm sure.
And some of those you can reassociate new, right? Like somebody who's afraid of heights, something exposed. Sometimes people talk, you've heard about exposure therapy, right? Sometimes being in the fireworks, but doing it in such a way that you are attaching new emotions to it, right? The fireworks means that I'm with friends. The fireworks means that I'm having fun.
I'm celebrating. So, yes, absolutely.
Right. So you can teach yourself a new association and overcome the old association.
Yeah.
But so that's more of a professional, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, Felicia, do you want to add something?
Like
homeopathic.
I'm not sure. Do you guys want me to talk about this? Is like a whole entire talk. Like, I don't mind maybe mentioning. Give me, I don't know, some a trigger that you would like to be looking at homeopathy and homeopathic approach per se, or else we can leave it for next time too. But I can always, I don't know which one are we looking for.
Can you give us a general explanation of how homeopathic remedies work with your body, and what types of things that you can use homeopathic remedies for in relation to triggers?
Okay, well, let's start where homeopathy is. So it was founded late 1700 by a German doctor. And it is a system of medicine that uses dilute substances to stimulate your inner vitality and inner ability to heal. It is holistic, so it means that it really looks at the whole person and it treats the whole person and supports our individual healing mechanism, mind, body, and spirit. Now, remedies usually are chosen to fit the patient's entire symptom picture, including their mental, emotional, and physical states. So the theory behind homeopathic medicine is that likes cures likes. So I can give you the quickest example, and not to do with triggers, because that's a little more in depth. But the quickest example will be allergies, for example, with burning, runny nose, and watery eyes, can be treated with the so-called homeopathic onion, Allium cepa, which is a Latin name for onion. So what's important to understand is that homeopathy treats both acute and chronic conditions. Now, the remedies are powerful, yet they are very gentle. So they can be used for children, for pregnant women, for those on medications. And homeopathic medicine are safe and effective for the whole person, as I said. So coming back to triggers, just so I can answer that question, I'm trying to think, like, what can we, let's talk about fastidiousness, for example. There are certain degree of perfectionism in certain people. And when they can elaborate and work with their internal need for perfectionism, there is some kind of a imbalance in their in this overly meticulous personality. So there are many homeopathic remedies, and I'm going to mention maybe one or maybe two. I can say for that particular trigger, for example, we can use Nux vomica or Ignatia. Those are plants remedies. And let's say you have repetitive thoughts. When people feel threatened, and I get that from what you both expressed of how you expressed your triggered. So when people feel threatened rather, they tend to have thoughts that they don't desire, they don't want, but the thoughts come in their mind repeatedly. So these thoughts go on and on like a broken record, disturbing their concentration and peace of mind. So for that particular repetitive thoughts, we can also use Nux vomica. And it's also another remedy called Tuya. Does that? I don't know. I can give another example.
So
let's say.
So when you take those remedies, which whether they're a pill form or a dissolving form or whatever they may be, when you take those remedies, are they triggering your body to release hormones that, like, you know what I mean? Like, what is it doing inside? Like, what is that doing to your body that results in peace of mind?
So homeopathic remedies can assist people who want to work on their emotional, mental, spiritual growth and development. So how they work, it's helping your body from the inside out. So for example, the remedies can help people who strive to achieve a more positive mindset and feeling better about themselves. So instead of having, I said earlier, instead of having negative moods, for example, and thoughts, you will end up having more positive outlook on life, because the remedy works with the whole of you. So it's not just mental, emotional, it's physical too. It's digestion, it's everything. It's interconnected and has an impact on how you react or how you respond. So once I understand the whole picture of who you are and everything about you, then I can go to a remedy that it's like cures like. So a remedy that mimics exactly what you're saying you experiencing and feeling. So it's not per se that you take a remedy and that changes your mindset. But as I said earlier, for example, if you tend to be irritable and judgmental, you will become more tolerant. So the situation won't change. But when people are acting around you in a certain way that you get triggered, let's say, and you become judgmental and or you say that I can't manage that, I don't like that, or whatever it is that you say, the remedy works at the cellular level such that when those triggers happen, you just act like as if it didn't happen. Like you have a way of managing that it's almost not understandable, because it makes it works with your internal vitality to transform things from the inside out.
Cool. That's really cool.
We both had the same.
Yeah, I really like that. But I do want to talk just dedicated to homeopathy, because I find it so interesting when you give us that example of the onion as a remedy for allergies. Someone who's allergic has runny eyes, and onions make you have runny eyes. And I'm wondering, why are we using onions to rectify allergies?
Well, it's kind of goes back to what I just said. It's the theory behind homeopathic medicine. It's like cures likes. So it's unlike allopathic medicine, who gives you the exact opposite. Another example would be when you burn your finger. You right away are being taught that put it under cold water or put ice on it. Well, homeopathic practitioner will come to you and say, don't put it on cold. Put it on hot water. For 1 second, it will burn really bad, but guess what? You will not have a blister and you will heal a lot faster.
I didn't know that.
So that's kind of the theory. That's why it's like cures like. So tell me what you're feeling. Do you have insomnia? Perhaps I can give you a homeopathic coffee.
Huh.
And then that will help you with the insomnia. Right? It's very complex. So I would rather leave this for next month. And if I can explain two things. If you have any questions, like today we talked about triggers, maybe we come up with something and we discuss that, and I explain how homeopathy will work on that.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good topic.
Felicia, maybe you can actually get in touch with Stephen, after the show and help him, because he's asking you a question. He says, Felicia, how can I increase my energy levels since my strokes? I'm tired all the time, thereby more irritable. So
is Stephen able to join us next month? If can we promise to address that next month? Because I know we only have less than 3 minutes left today.
Yes. So that's why I thought maybe Felicia can comment after the show on Facebook. And also, I think I wanted to read something else too. Let me see. I simply refuse to allow anyone or anything have that much control over me. I would typically yell out in the dark, "Shut the hell up." That's at the movie. I regularly realize or say, "Shh." That's better. I regularly realize I should shut up right after I've said it, especially around my wife. That's funny. So that was a question put out for you, Felicia. If you care to comment on that after
I will. Yes.
On Facebook, that would be awesome. He also says fatigue and depression are like crawling through wet cement.
Mm.
Yep.
Wow.
I hear you.
I hear you
too.
I hear you too. So we're about 2 minutes before the end of the show. Colleen, was there anything else you wanted to leave us with, or do you want to just wrap it up and bring it back?
Well, there was anchors. So one of the, preemptive. So one of the things that you can do ahead of time, planning to help you, is using an anchor. And I don't know if the audience has heard of an anchor before, but I went to my hypnotherapist back in the day. That's how my coaching world started. And she taught me how to set an anchor. So basically what an anchor is that you're intentionally setting a trigger to bring you to a happy place. So how we did my anchor is that she had, we did in a group session. So there was a group of us, and she said, okay, so I want you to imagine a situation where you felt elated, super happy, super at peace of mind, like everything. It was the best feeling in the world, or something that made you laugh. And she said, laugh out loud. So we all got into this state of high emotion, high positive emotion. And she said, while you're at the peak of that emotion, she said, choose something that you can touch or that you can have access to when you're in any situation that is discreet. So whether it was, touching your ear, there was like between your fingers, like just tapping the top of your hand, something that's discreet, but you're setting an intention. So you're setting an anchor, so that in a situation where you want to have that happy feeling, that you can just discreetly, do that motion or whatever it might be. And it can't be something that you're going to do by accident, right? Like if it's something like touching the top of your hand, if you sit like this often, that's not a good trigger for you, because then you're gonna confuse the trigger. But most of us don't touch our ear very often, or tap your elbow, or so whatever it is. Choose some kind of physical touch that can bring you back to that emotion in a split second. And you may have to reinforce that trigger sometimes, but it allows you to have something to do in the moment that will switch your frame of thought or your emotions in that second.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
I find
So
the
it's
easiest.
called setting an anchor. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I find the easiest for everyone. Mind you, some people cannot because they just hold on to their breath. The way to calm mind, body, spirit fast, the fastest way is to take a deep breath and exhale deeply. And I find that though it sounds like a common sense and it's something that's so easy in our mind just because we talk about it and we are in a good state here, we are having a good time. But when you have a trigger where when you are emotionally disturbed, you can't breathe, you hold your breath.
That's why step 2 is breathe. Because so stop, recognize that you're doing it, and then take deep breaths. Absolutely.
Deep breath and exhale it. I find that so many people do not do that, or they inhale well but then just stop. Their exhale is so short.
So did you know, well, you would know this because you're a homeopath, but the stress response is actually because we hold our breath, not because we're not getting enough breath.
Absolutely.
The stress response, that the cortisol release is triggered because you're holding your breath, not because you're not breathing. It's because it's because you're not expelling the carbon dioxide.
That is so good to know. So good to know. So by exhaling slow, you are basically decreasing stress levels, the cortisol levels, and that allows you to relax and become calm and not be triggered so much. That's really good. Could you show us a couple of, maybe do 3 proper breathing, Felicia, and we'll all follow.
Okay. So it's always good to open up the body. So don't cross legs, don't cross your arms. Keep them open and open up yourself, right? So you sit up as straight as you can. And we're gonna inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Okay? So we're gonna count as we inhale to 3, hold it for a second at the top, and as we exhale, we count to 4 in our mind. But for this purpose of this exercise, I'm gonna just count loud, but usually I don't count loud. Okay, so we inhale for 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top for a second, and we exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do it again without counting. Everybody counts in their mind, so that way I can show you how I breathe too. One more time. So let's imagine we take a deep breath from our belly. So think about your belly button. So let's see how that goes. So inhale through your belly. 1, 2, 3, go.
Why are you laughing?
My youngest daughter is beside me. She's looking at us and she's laughing really.
Okay, laugh therapy is awesome. Just saying.
She loves laugh therapy. It's her favorite. Come and say hi.
We've done laugh therapy before, the 3 of us.
She's gonna come and say hi.
A lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah. Your neighbors thought we were crazy, Della, but yes, the laugh therapy was awesome.
Hi. You're live,
Yeah.
She's gone.
Hi, my apologies. It was supposed to be a very nice moment.
Thank you for that breathing exercise, Felicia. That was wonderful. It's always so helpful. We take a moment and really breathe properly. So thank you so much. She keeps laughing. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Actually, let's take this moment, guys, and laugh. Okay, let's try it for 1 minute. Just laugh.
We're already almost 6 minutes over, so we can do it after we get off stop broadcasting. We will definitely have a little 1 minute laugh session.
All right. So this is the butterfly effect, bringing you love,
hope,
and color.
And And thank you, everybody, for being
Bye,
here.
everyone.
And
Thank you for all your sharing.
right. So when is our next butterfly effect? Do we know the third
Yep.
Thursday of
It
November?
is Thursday, November 18th. And Miss Felicia will be our primary host and determining the subject. So it sounds like it might be homeopathic medicine coming up.
Laugh therapy. Bye, everybody. Till next time.
Children, sorry.